The meeting will start.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'd like to call to order the December 13th, 2023 City of Asheville Multimodal Transportation Commission meeting. My name is Jack Eigelman. Hey, good afternoon, I chair everyone, and welcome. And I'd like to call to order the December 13th, 2023 City of Asheville Multimodal Transportation Commission meeting. There are many ways. My name is Jack Eigelman. I chair everyone, and the City of Asheville. I'd like to call to order the December 13th, 2023 City of Asheville Multimodal Transportation Commission. There are many ways. My name is Jack. The City of Asheville. Visiting the City of Asheville. I call to order the December 13th, everyone, the City of Asheville. Muted meeting transportation commission. There are many ways. My name is Jack. The City of Asheville. Visiting the City of Asheville. Any other background noise? And everyone, the City. I'd now like to use the meeting roll call and also our commission to my City of Asheville. So members, when I call you any other background noise, briefly introduce yourself and let us know what's in your meeting roll call and also Kennedy Armstrong, our vice president, absent today. So members, when I call Joseph Barker will also be absent and introduce yourself and let us know as well. So Joseph Scheffler, I believe you're out there.
Thanks, Jack.
I represent the City of Asheville Committee, which is the Citizens Advisory Group focused on increasing the availability of infrastructure, pedestrians, bicyclists, and other field human transportation that places of emphasis on human dignity. I represent the City of Asheville Committee, which is the Citizens Advisory Group focused on increasing the availability of pedestrians, bicyclists, and other field human transportation that places of emphasis on human dignity.
Hi, I'm Randy Warren. I'm in large roughly walking.
Thanks, Randy. And Mike Kowski, Randy Warren.
Hi, Mike. Randy Warren. I'm in large roughly. I represent
Randy and Mike Kowski, that does give us a quorum. We have out of 9 voting commission members. I'd also like to welcome our non-voting commission members, and we have some changes. First of all, Jared Wheatley joined us last meeting for now our official liaison from the planning. I'd also like to welcome commission. Jared, would you give us a brief introduction, maybe a little bit about your background? First of all, Jared Wheatley joined us last meeting for now our official liaison from the planning. I'd also like to welcome commission. Jared, would you give us a brief introduction, maybe a little bit about your background?
I'm a general contractor. I'm a father of 2 married to downtown rental residents. I'm going to cycle around downtown, skateboard around downtown, cycle around downtown. My background is kids were both born and raised general contractor. My father is a military nation, so residents. I'm going to cycle around downtown. Land is really important to me. As far as that goes, that ties in community with me philosophically with public transportation, so yeah, from an education perspective, I have instructions in commerce and as far as a master's degree in commerce and development. So my hope is public transportation not to be overly some in a bad way, but definitely to ensure that my master's degree is really transparent with everyone. So over here, my hope is about the different happenings that could have potential impact to MMTC, and then also back the other way, the ideas and concepts projects. I've seen the really big project list come out, and make sure that we sit in those PZC meetings and we're taking into account the perspectives of this group as well. I'm super passionate about that right now.
Awesome, Jared. Great to have you here with us. I'd also like to announce that Elizabeth Lycus Worley is no longer the liaison, and she for the Neighborhood Advisory Commission. She does send her best and was grateful for the opportunity to serve with us. She has handed the reins to Jake Smith, who is with us and will be the liaison from the Neighborhood Advisory Commission. Jake, are you there? Would you like to give us a little background?
Sure. As Jack mentioned, I am from the Neighborhood Advisory Committee. I've served for just over a year now on that committee. I helped organize the Festival of Neighborhoods last year, which was a lot of fun and some good success. We had Asheville on bikes and a few other transit opportunities there, including the city buses. I joke around that I consider myself to be a professional cyclist. I got bored in 2015 and rode from Seattle to Key West, and I've done a few other long bike rides as well. My and a 5-year-old French bulldog, and won't comment on how old my wife is. My family's been around Asheville for just over 200 years, and I work remotely as a security engineer to make sure everybody's money stays where it should.
Awesome, Jake. Hey, it's great to have you with us. Welcome aboard. And I'd also like to welcome our City Council liaison, Maggie Ullman. Maggie, are you here with us? I think I see your icon.
Yeah, hey everybody. Welcome to the new friends that are joining. My name is Maggie, and I served on MMTC before I was elected, and now I get to be your liaison. And I am a little in and out with Ruby today, but I'm here even if my video's not on.
And let's see, we have a guest speaker, Haley Burton. I'd like to welcome Haley, who will be speaking on the micro mobility policy. And of course, all of our transportation staff that's here. I think Jessica, and I've just seen Jessica tune in. Any other city staff with us, and Janet, of course. Anyone I'm missing? Anna, welcome Anna Sexton, and Lucy. Hi, Lucy. Thank you all for the great work that you all do for us in the city. So we will move on to begin the agenda. Are there any comments or questions about today's agenda for December 13th? And if not, would someone make a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Okay, Leanna, is there a second?
Sure, I'll second.
All right, thanks, Randy. And committee members, when I say your name, please say aye or nay. Let's see, Joe Chesler.
Aye.
Leanna.
Aye.
Bill.
Aye.
Randy.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
And myself am an aye, so the motion passes. The agenda is approved. And are there any comments or edits or questions regarding the last meeting minutes from November 15th, 2023?
I unfortunately wasn't able to get them to open, but I remember having this trouble last month too, so maybe it's like operator error on my end. I just might abstain from voting if I can.
I had the same issue. I couldn't. I apologize for not trying to check earlier, but I checked just a short while ago and I didn't have access to the document.
I apologize if you did not receive it. I can send it to you now, if that will help. And Randy, I think I did share it with you if you check your email.
my suggestion is that we go ahead and table that so folks have an opportunity to review it. We'll add it to the next agenda and approve those if that's okay with folks. All right, excellent. There are no public comments this week, but I do have several announcements. We're going to use this time for a couple of updates. But I would like to start with a bit of sobering news. I just saw in the Citizen Times just a little bit earlier that cyclist Dwayne Sherlin passed away over the weekend. He was struck by a vehicle on Brevard Road on November 29th in the area, I believe, between Interstate 40 and the Interstate 40 interchange and the Interstate 240 interchange, if you know where that is. But I just wanted to mention that to remind us of not that you all need a reminder, but of the reminder of the important work that we're doing and supporting to make our streets safer. It's unfortunate when anyone is hurt or lost. I also, if you haven't had a chance, I encourage you to check out the city council meeting from last night. At roughly, this is pretty rough, but at about an hour and 28 minutes, there's a discussion of the right-of-way off of Sulphur Springs Road in West Asheville. For those of you who are new, Jared and Jake, we vote on right-of-ways. We make recommendations to the city council. Ultimately, we don't have any power to approve or deny a right-of-way, but we did vote 5-2 not to recommend the right-of-way in this particular instance, because once the city turns that right-of-way into private land, it can no longer get it back. And this particular right-of-way happened to connect two streets. The city council passed that right-of-way, it approved the right-of-way, but I thought there was a really good discussion and great comments from Jessica and Maggie on a little bit about our discussion and some of our concerns and why we voted 5-2. Maggie, would you mind saying a couple words about that? I really appreciate your comments and thought it might be useful if you have any insight or anything you wanted to pass on based on that discussion for the commission to think about.
Sure. My reflection, having listened into the MMTC call when we discussed this initially, and then I also, since you all voted it down, I was like, let me talk to the applicant too. I just wanted to see some more information. So I went on site and talked to the applicant, and I've talked to staff. And really what surfaced for me with this project is what happens often is it felt like we were having a conversation about policy in the midst of a project review, which happens. I mean, last night, if you watch the rest of council, we did that very intimately about affordable housing rates while we were talking about a specific project. And so my experience of your conversation with the right-of-way was that there were questions about the ultimate purpose of MMT's review, the strategic purpose, ultimately, sure, could this paper road one day become a really important part of a transportation network? That's a really obvious link that makes sense, but we also have a lot of maps to do that. And so it just seems like for several years, this committee has gone, cool, right-of-ways come to us. Is there a bigger picture that we could be tapping into? And that came out. And then there were some other parts about this particular proposal because there was a retaining wall built on one part of the property by a different owner. So there was a handful of things going on. And so what I really wanted to lift up to council was about the policy part of it, although I did carry, and Jessica did a good job carrying the specific applicant conversation that you had, and really what is a strategic insight around right of way. And part of what Jessica brought up is that my extrapolation is that even in MMTC conversations, I hear us grappling with like bigger strategy ideas, like what could this do for infill housing if we want to have dense neighborhoods that have access to walkable places. But Jessica is really highlighting that the actual right-of-way closure law is like really, really, really narrow. And so I don't think the council conversation came up with any aha or here's an insight for the interplay between council and MMTC, but I think it was helpful for them to hear that there's some of this tension happening. The other thing that we surfaced is MMTC has really asked for and said, well, maybe something that we could do that around right-of-ways is really ask staff to look at all the right-of-ways and kind of do a comprehensive analysis of their potential value and where they are and awareness, and admit it, or understandably, staff has some concerns about how much time that could take. Now, if we take out the human element, which you never can, right? You go like, okay, well, say we had infinite time. Is that the most strategic and best use? And how does stuff get on the work plan? And it doesn't just get on the work plan because we talk about it in a meeting. It has to be kind of folded in. But now that concept of there are a bunch of paper roads that there's no overarching tracking of, awareness of, and they aren't necessarily like a play, if you would call it that, in anyone's policy context. We were able to have that conversation at City Council. And so now myself and my fellow councilwomen are kind of abreast of the layers you've been digging into as this process has exposed you to them. So I don't know if that's clear as mud, but that was kind of my takeaway, which I find good. I do find, there's another email train, Mike, that you and I are on about the wayfinding conversation you had last time, and I'll be getting back to you on that. But I think that proposal and this is a good example of how the complex dynamic between boards and commissions and council works, right? And that, it's not that a committee says, we recommend this and then it shall be, but I think what needs to happen is when you all are exposing conversation that's important, I think part of my role is to figure out where, when, and how to expose other councilwomen to it, and for you all to advocate, hey, everybody should be hearing about this, and it's kind of a gray zone, but a zone that's worth us exploring more. And I know upcoming retreats will probably dig into this.
Yes.
All right, sorry, I kept the mic for a long time.
No, thank you, Maggie. Brief comments, I'll go to Jared and then Joe Chesler. Jared, floor is yours.
I heard that narrow legal definition or legal right of way constraint last night too, and I don't know what that means. I'm just a kind of a bozo on that subject. What do you mean by narrow? There's a narrow.
How the state sets the law is that the state has a very narrow definition. I'd be happy to send that to you, Jared. I was looking at it yesterday.
That'd be great. Yeah, I'll just read it. It's
yeah.
The thing is, like, we can't close a right of way, or the private can't close the right of, like, there needs to be public purpose or public harm in anything we ever consider, right? The city can't do something just to make money or because we're petty or whatever. And so it anchors to, is there an overarching public purpose? So if someone asks to close a right of way, they're a contiguous landowner, it's hard for us to deny it, but for harm to the public or an established public benefit. And so if I was like, I don't like you, you're a jerk, that's illegal, we can't do that. But if I was like, we want to close, you can't close it because that's my alien landing point, like that's not legal either, right? But if I say, this has a potential benefit to our evolving multimodal network, that's a public purpose. Or if you close it, you would harm
like if students from Lucy S. Herring were walking that path and they were using it in an informal way, that would still be a public good.
It all comes into a legal place, but that's the exercise we mentally need to do.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was a good.
I really appreciate you.
It was a good conversation. Joe, over to you.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Maggie. I unfortunately did not listen to the debate last night, but Clearly, the motion we passed a few months ago asking for a more comprehensive look at all these rights-of-way was intended not to be punitive on the applicants, but clearly to identify low-hanging fruit, if you will, and opportunities that might connect in areas that might not have been thought of. So am I to understand from your summary then from last night that comprehensive look will not be going forward in the current work plan, or do we need more discussion?
What I would say, and Jessica, you jump in if it looks like your earbuds were on, is that I think it's more a question of like, how are work plans set? And council doesn't set work plans, and nor do boards and commissions. Council sets policy and budget, and then staff and management say, okay, based on your policy direction, how will we create a work plan to support this? And then theoretically, boards and commissions say, hey, council, let's look at this policy, or council says, hey, commission, work on this policy. And a work plan item is just a different bucket, right? Because you could imagine, right? Say there were people who wanted more roads and they got on this commission and they were just like, build more roads. Like, that's not how we want it to work. So I think what my observation is that when things that need work bubble and come here, I think it's good for us as commissions to distill, like, what's the problem we're trying to solve? What's the policy connection? And even if we have a cool work plan or project idea, make sure we're really crisp on the problem we're trying to solve and the policy connection, and make sure that is really clear to staff and the electeds. And then if there's an idea for a program, it'll bounce around and may come to fruition, but I don't think anyone is going to take that recommendation and say, great, we're going to add it to the list now. But I think what we're surfacing is there's an asset that has potential to inform how our community grows. What can we do about it? And you all highlighted that no one's really thinking about that yet. So I'll stop rambling there. Does that?
No,
again,
that's good. That's really good. Leanna, over to you for a brief comment.
My brief comment is I recall very clearly making the recommendation. So I take some responsibility for trying to make assignments to staff. Sorry. I think it's very much informed by my work with a lot of civic groups that I help support, and volunteers say we need this. And then I'm charged with making sure that we deliver something that helps our civically and engaged and informed community get what they need to feel supported. So I apologize for overstepping there. I will say, it might happen again. I don't want to give myself a free pass in advance, but I would also encourage you, Jessica, or others to remind us, like, you might reframe that in this way. Think more about what the real need is and how you might achieve that. And if it's a work plan thing, it's not going to happen for several years or until it gets, put in a level of priority where it would need to happen. And I think it's okay to turn back to this citizenry that isn't invested in this and say, if you think that's important, figure out what GIS specialists and people who have the knowledge and support in the community that might be able to help you achieve the goal. And so I think, we do have limited staff capacity available to us, and we can't assign those tasks, but I think that doesn't mean that no is no, right? I think we might need to be thinking more creatively about how we can achieve those same desired outcomes. So I really appreciate the note on work plan process, and I hope I don't err again, but I might, because sometimes it's the fastest way to move a conversation along, and so I'll just offer that.
And I think it was, I think we can keep right-of-ways are something that we're presumably going to keep looking at as a commission, and so I really appreciated the opportunity to look at one. That was the first one that I had looked at the commission that actually did connect two streets rather than a no-brainer kind of right-of-way that, had no legacy or had no reason to exist any longer. So I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation, and everyone, thanks for your thoughts and updates. And I don't think it's, I think it's something that I hope we'll continue to come back to, especially as people start looking for every little lot to build on and make part of our city. That's something that's happening right now. So I commend y'all for putting it on the table of something that is potentially important to our work and to the city. I'm gonna hand the torch to Jared, and he's going to give us just a little overview of the recently released missing middle housing study. And we are not a housing commission, but we are a transportation commission, and we care about equity and affordable housing where people live. They all have to get somewhere, so we're linked up. But I thought it'd be a great opportunity to hear from Jared. I hope we can come back to this later and make it more, part of the things that we're talking about, but at the very least, giving Jared a chance to talk a little bit about it. And maybe I'll throw the link up in the chat messages so at least folks can find it. Go ahead, Jared.
Really, really appreciate it. It's the report, the missing middle report is about 150 pages long. So I'm not going to be touching on every page in this review. What I will do, if it's okay, is maybe just send out a couple of just quick snippets in the group email later, just to provide a little bit more insight. But basically, the study was put together to look at missing middle, I'm air quoting, housing, which includes more like townhomes, condos, small apartment complexes, like think maybe 4 to 16 units, and then type fit those housing types in different zones that we have in the city currently. So this would be RM6, RM16, and then RS8 were the zones that they really focused on. And they did find opportunities to fit, and then they did talk about the variances of that. One of the big focuses that the study had, and why it is so relevant to MMTC, is that they really focused on walkability as a social good. And so if you look at any of the maps and the diagrams as you move through the missing middle housing report, you'll find a blue and a red dashed line that shows approximate walking distance from commercial activity. As we're all aware on here, that's a huge equity issue, is that you may live in a food desert, you may not have an opportunity to easily get to retail and commerce, your job may be far away from where you live. And so missing middle housing is literally meant to take the land that we have in Asheville and essentially produce more of it. So there's that old retail, or that old real estate saying of, they're not making more of land. Well, interestingly, through zoning, you can't make more physical land, but what you can do is allow for development that brings more units, more dwelling units per acre. Specifically, they have a target of 16 dwelling units per acre as transit supportive. That's the term they use. Almost none of the zoning types that exist within the city of Asheville right now actually can really reach 16 dwelling units per acre. That's really just at where RM16 is. So the maps do a really good job of using colors to break down the different zoning types and show where there may be zoning opportunities. And where the big play is between MMTC and PZC, as far as we've talked about it on our board, and as far as I think we could entertain the conversation here, is how can, when these conversations around zoning modifications, they come up, maybe we, whether it's somebody else from PZC, whether it's somebody from staff, somebody comes to this board and presents it also here to where you guys can see how it overlays and works with the transportation. In particular, our transportation corridors right now are primarily zoned commercial, either CB1 or RB, which is regional business. and those have height restrictions down to 2 stories. So if you're ever traveling like up Merriman Avenue and you see a Chick-fil-A, or you see a Wendy's, or you see any of these things, that's because zoning makes building that kind of thing extraordinarily easy, and then it makes housing relatively difficult. So the report wraps all that up, and then it spends a good amount of time also talking about displacement within, or displacement potential within different neighborhoods around Asheville, obviously primarily focusing on our legacy neighborhoods. Some areas are not necessarily prone to displacement because they've already gentrified. That would be West Asheville. So if you are interested in taking a little bit of a look at this, really towards the back of the book, there's maybe somewhere between 10 and 15 diagrams. And you can flip back and forth between those pages and just start to play around with those concepts in your mind a little bit. But I do think that staff in particular is looking to be, it's not a popular word, but I'm going to say aggressive, with trying to roll out zoning modifications that would bring more dwelling units in, because currently I think the shortage is somewhere around 5,000 units that are undersupplied to our area. And equity is a big play in the missing middle because it provides an ownership component, which is how most people actually hold their wealth in the United States.
Thanks, Jared. Yeah, that was quick. I know there's a lot to unpack and all of that, and you're not getting enough time to do it, but that was great. I do want to point out, I put a couple of links, folks, that you can find. But tomorrow, December 14th, is the second virtual presentation of the middle missing. You can find that link in the report that I also linked there, but we'll try and get that out via email. So I think a cool opportunity for us to figure out how we plug in. Thanks, Jared, for doing that on really short notice. We're going to move on to new business. And our first agenda item is to consider the appointment of Kara, I believe it's Kara or Cara, I'm not sure, we'll get that clarified, Wheeler, to the Transit Committee. And I presume you've had an opportunity to look at Wheeler's application. And are there any questions, comments, or thoughts? And Jessica, Jessica, I believe your name is attached to this. Would you tell us a little more, give us some background, and love to hear from the Transit Committee as well?
Sure. So the Transit Committee is attempting to fill some vacancies, and they have recommended the appointment of Kara Wheeler, and I believe they voted to forward her name Multimodal at their last meeting. And so one of Multimodal Commission's responsibilities is to make the actual appointments. And so generally we have the subcommittee make a recommendation, and then we bring it forward to you guys.
I'm happy to make the recommendation to appoint Kara Wheeler to the Transit Committee.
And I'll second that.
Okay, a second. So a motion by Leanna, second by Joe Chesler. Is there any other discussion before we vote?
Jack, this is Bill. I'll just say that the Transit Committee was unanimous and excited about this application.
Oh, nice. And why, Bill? Why excited? I'm curious.
There was a passion behind it that was obvious, so that was nice.
I did notice, I guess age is not something to consider, but I know commissions and committees tend to trend older. So it was nice to have younger folks being interested in making time to serve on committees and commissions. That's one thing that I noticed. How many members are there right now on the committee, Bill? Do you know?
I do not. There's less than here. The quorum for that committee is, well, I get my numbers messed up. Maybe 7. Joe, do you know?
Yeah, I think it's 4 is the quorum, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, 4 is the quorum, so
And 7
bounce that
members.
up to 7 or 8, something like that. I don't know.
But you're short of members.
George Johnson.
Y'all are short of members, Bill.
I think we are.
Yeah.
I think there's still a couple opening, at least one.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we have any other discussion, folks, before we vote? Okay, commission members, when I say your name, please say aye or nay in favor of the motion to appoint Carol Wheeler to the Transit Committee. Joe Chesler.
Absolutely. Aye.
Leanna Joyner.
Aye.
And Bill Loftus.
Aye.
Randy Warren.
Aye.
Mike Zukowski.
Aye.
And I'm an aye, and the motion carries to appoint Miss Wheeler. All right, we are moving on to our next agenda item under unfinished business, which is with Haley Burton, who's going to present on micromobility policy. Looking forward to hearing it. Haley?
Thanks, Joe. I'm going to share my screen. And while I'm doing that, just for those who don't know me, I'm a planner in the transportation department. I work in the transportation planning division with Anna and Lucy. And yeah, I'm looking forward to talking through these policy considerations with you all today. So this presentation is going to be on personal micromobility devices and some policy recommendations regarding their use in the city. Just for some project background and key takeaways, as I'm sure you're all aware of, in October of this year, Council passed a resolution directing staff to move forward with the College Patent Complete Streets project. And as part of that resolution, they also asked staff to prepare ordinance amendments to permit use of all modes of personal transportation within bike lanes. And as we all know, we don't have a perfect, complete bike network in our city. There's not bike lanes on every street. So we understood that as part of that ask, we needed to look into other similar existing ordinances for other facilities such as sidewalks, roads, and greenways. And so we've drafted some recommendations, and with your feedback and other feedback received through this process, we'll integrate those into some ordinance revisions that we'll bring forward to council. Would also note that currently e-scooters are banned on public streets in the city. I think a couple years back, some operators came and dropped some scooters on the street and resulted into a full ban of e-scooters, both for privately operated and also for personally owned e-scooters. Also in our ordinance, there skateboards, roller skates, and other devices known as coasters are currently banned on streets and on sidewalks in business districts. That being said, since that time, technology has improved a lot, prices have decreased, and there's been an increase in individuals owning personal micromobility devices, that including e-bikes and e-skateboards, hoverboards. You see them around town. So we know that those are already used in Asheville, even though many of them are prohibited and their use is growing. So updating our ordinances will remove barriers to using these personal mobility devices and will allow for increased transportation options throughout the city. So just to give a brief definition of micromobility for those of you who are wondering what that term I'm throwing around is. The Federal Highway Administration broadly defines micromobility as any small, low-speed human or electric-powered transportation device that includes bicycles, scooters, e-bikes, e-scooters, and other small, lightweight wheeled conveniences. Some of the benefits of micromobility are flexible and equitable mobility options, support for multimodal transportation connections. Often these devices are seen as first and last mile connections towards transit. We can also see emissions reductions and reduce congestion and fuel use in the city as people move away from motor vehicles and onto these smaller devices. There are improved physical and mental health benefits, individual financial savings through reduced transportation costs. Compared with a car, these are much more affordable. And as we know, as there's more people on the roads, more cyclists, more scooter riders, other drivers notice those people. They became more aware of those riders, and the streets become safer. I'll also just add that most of those benefits are listed directly in our Complete Streets policy that's currently adopted by the city. So we have 8 initial policy considerations, or I guess 8 conversations to have today. I won't go through each of them right now, but these are the ones that we'll be looking into today. And just before we get into them, I just want to comment on how these policies were drafted. We used some different guides from different micromobility industry standards and transportation organizations, including NACDO, an organization called NABSA, which is the North American Bike Share and Scooter Share Association, Rails to Trails, and other reputable organizations. We also referenced micromobility policies and programs in other municipalities and took into consideration some of the public feedback received through the process of the draft micromobility feasibility study. That study has not been adopted and we're not bringing it forward at this time, but we did still think there was valuable input through that process. And these, I will also say that these are draft policies still subject to change through additional feedback. And they're not exact language, but they're the general concept and the general, I guess, outcomes we're trying to achieve through these policies. So the first policy consideration is to adopt a definition of micromobility devices that will include electric and human-powered devices not currently addressed in city or state code. So we don't currently have a definition of micromobility devices within our city code. Bicycles are within the code, but that is something that we would like to make a clear definition of micromobility. We also, through that process, need to reconcile various different terms to update related ordinances and provide clarity. One other note about that is we want to make sure that we exclude wheelchairs from the definition of micromobility, though how we consider and should be allowed. The third policy consideration is to consider to continue to prohibit shared e-scooter and other micromobility device companies to operate within the city of Asheville at this time. We think until there's a greater appetite for a shared micromobility program, we should hold off on permitting operators at this time, but we also understand that as addressing some of these policies related to personal micromobility devices will better position us for the future if we do want to bring in a shared micromobility program. The fourth policy consideration is to allow the use of micromobility devices in bike lanes and on low-speed local streets, which the industry standards define as 25 mile per hour or less roads. We want to exclude, in setting that policy, we want to make sure that we exclude bicycles from being allowed from not, how do I say this, from having to ride on low speed streets only. We don't want that to apply to them. And while avoiding defining wheelchairs as micromobility, we also want to allow for the use of wheelchairs in bike lanes and on low speed local streets. We know that sometimes our sidewalks aren't ADA compliant. We're working on it, but sometimes it's just the reality that a bike lane is the better option for users in wheelchairs. The fifth policy consideration is to allow for the use of these micromobility devices on greenways and on trails. This would be both human-powered and electric devices, and on paved and natural surface trails. A conversation we want to have with you all is around speed or device requirements. I think we have mixed thoughts about how to handle speeds. 15 miles per hour is often recommended, but that's not very easily enforceable for personal devices. We could also take the approach of signing and messaging on the greenway instead of, or in addition to, writing it into the city code. And I'll definitely come back to these slides for discussion, but I'll just go through them all to begin with. So policy consideration number 6 and number 7. These are tricky ones, but the recommendation or the conversation to have is around prohibiting the use of micromobility devices on sidewalks within the central business district. And this is due to the high volume of pedestrian traffic and in consideration for wheelchair users and anyone on the sidewalks with disabilities. So proactively banning sidewalk riding in the CBD can avoid conflicts between those different users. And the CBD has low speeds and in some cases bike lanes, which would allow for other multimodal options and connections. In the same line of thought, we would want to allow the use of micromobility devices on public sidewalks outside of the central business district. This is because in many cases, riding on sidewalks, users will feel safer. There'll be instances outside of the central business district where there's very low pedestrian traffic and maybe a high speed road. So the sidewalk would actually be the safer option in those cases. I added a little bit more context of some advantages and disadvantages to help guide our conversation. So for prohibiting use of micromobility devices on sidewalks in the CBD, as mentioned, some advantages are avoiding conflicts with pedestrians, wheelchair users, elderly children, dogs. There's lots of dogs in Asheville on these high pedestrian traffic sidewalks. It will also avoid conflicts with business storefronts. And as mentioned, most streets in the CBD are already low speed and a safe option for riders. An additional advantage is in case of sidewalk crashes, if there is an ordinance involving, if there is an ordinance, then it is a little bit more clear who may be at fault, or we may know how to address those crashes more clearly. Leanna, did you have a quick comment?
I do. I'm also happy to wait until you finish.
What's your discretion? Is it relevant right now?
I think it does relate to 6 and 7, but also
Why don't you go ahead, Leanna? Go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. Well, so related to number 7 in particular, and I think it relates to several of your advantages and disadvantages here. I'm wondering if we stay silent on roads outside of the central business district. So like when I was reading 7 and I was doing the thought exercise of where that would be, like Hendersonville Road, it's a higher speed road. There aren't bike lanes, micromobility on those sidewalks. It's like in some ways providing an allowance for it creates the instances, I'm doing a lot of thinking about user conflict and speed in my head, right? And so I guess I'm wondering, it seems like there's benefit to in a forthright way saying it's allowed, but also there's hazards in saying that. And so I guess I just wonder if y'all have considered silence outside the CBD as it relates to micromobility and sidewalks.
So silence meaning not saying one way or the other?
Correct.
I don't think that's something we've said outright, but I think that's worth considering. Making a note of that real quick.
I like that idea, Leanna, because it struck me too as I don't know if I really want to encourage micro mobility on sidewalks. And I don't have a high expectation for high levels of enforcement of this.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in a way that I'd be okay with. There's other things you want to talk enforcement, and but I guess featuring sharing sidewalks outside of the CBD just might be a distraction from what's the essence is don't do this downtown. Here's where you can. So I thought the elegant solution is something that struck me as a little as well.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
So let's, I suggest we hold off on discussion. Jessica has her hand up. We'll go to Jessica and then turn it back over to you, Haley, to finish up, and then we'll definitely have a robust discussion afterwards. Jessica, go ahead.
So I just wanted to note that all of these conversations and feedback that we're going to get, we will be taking that forward and working with our city attorney's office also talk through some of these scenarios and questions. So for example, the question you just had, Leanna, we'll talk through that, whether that's even something that we can do. And so, yeah, that's why we wanted to bring these conversations up and not just bring red line draft changes of ordinances, because there's some nuances here that we want to hear from you guys on, but everything is going to also be going through our city attorney, just so you guys know that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think in general, our intent is to remove barriers to using personal micromobility devices. So we're not trying to, unintentionally add new barriers, but at the same time want to regulate this as best as we can. So just moving on, another disadvantage is that obviously you say the CBD, unless you're a planner looking at these every day, most people aren't going to know what those actual boundaries are. And you might need signage to educate and And as Maggie already mentioned, it's likely not really to be heavily enforced, and there's potential enforcement issues along the way. I think we already covered this. So basically it's a safe, outside of the CBD could be a safe riding option, but there could still be potential conflicts as well. So another alternative to, I guess, the language of a sidewalk ban is something called dismount zones, which we've seen other jurisdictions do, where people can get off of these devices and walk on the sidewalk, but not ride. And so there's just some different examples here of how we might mark that or use signage to mark where those zones are. And then the last policy consideration is to update and ensure consistency among regulations related to enforcement and removal of micromobility devices when left unintended. Basically, there's existing policies in our city code about removing a bicycle when it's been on public property after a certain amount of time. And so we want to make sure we're being consistent with those policies. And we also want to make sure we would still allow for the removal of micromobility devices from unpermitted private companies or operators. And then some just quick other policy notes. I have a link here to our city code library. Helmets is something that we would likely want to promote through the use of messaging, but it's something that the state of North Carolina sets the legal requirements around. And in North Carolina state law, currently anyone under the age of 16 must wear a helmet. Parking is also something that is kind of covered through existing code language that prohibits obstruction of the public sidewalks. Speeds, we mentioned a potential consideration for 15-mile-per-hour caps, especially on greenways or trails. That's something we definitely want to hear your feedback on. And then again, wheelchairs and mopeds, we don't want to consider those as micromobility. But in the case of wheelchairs, we do want to allow them for use of them in bike lanes, greenways, and on trails. So I think I'll stop there and open the floodgates.
Hey, Haley, thank you for summarizing that.
Sure.
I know there's a lot to share, so that was great. That was a really good overview. Y'all, I hope we can have a good discussion and questions. Make sure, let's stay focused on your time when you have the floor. Leanna, go ahead.
Question followed by a comment. In the Federal Highway Administration definition of micromobility, it specifically said low speed. Do they define what low speed is? Because you mentioned it as a neighborhood street we define as 25 or less. Is that the same?
They weren't defining the low. I need to pull it up really quick to get their exact language. I don't think they had 25 miles per hour or less, but I don't think that they had like a mile per hour for the devices themselves. It's like 15 miles per hour.
Yeah. So I think I am thinking a lot about user conflict and speed. But I work in trails, and user conflicts are something we deal with all the time. And so I guess just a couple comments on this for consideration as y'all dive deeper into this is, I think we can have ideals around what a top speed should be, and yet I think that enforcement piece is really challenging and difficult. And I think, knowing that 10 years ago, my cell phone didn't work as fast or have as much storage, et cetera, right, as it does today, the same kind of things I think are going to hold true for electric devices, speed, and everything else. And I guess I just ask that we figure out how to do a little future proofing in terms of, if we get to a point where speeds are exceeding this regularly, that we have an overflow mechanism. Can we put these devices back onto a road? So, because I think if we're actually looking at human safety, we can't start having devices that are moving so quickly in a shared space with people on foot and on human-powered bicycles and human-powered skateboards. So I think we would be doing ourselves a favor if we could look to how we might future-proof that as it relates to speed. And then the last thing I'll say about speed and electric devices, specifically on natural surface trails, is whether or not we are genuinely ready for the accelerated rate of erosion and the erosive potential that comes with electric vehicles. So your costs to increase on maintenance and repairs with that additional wear and tear. It is different. And we should just keep that in mind. Finally, and my last comment, and I'll shut up, I do support number 3 around prohibiting operators of shared micro. I think, I know there's probably benefit to it, but in my view, it ends up being a tripping and largely litter-like obstruction in public spaces. And I appreciate that we aren't grappling with that.
Thanks, Leanna.
Thank you.
Others, comments, folks? Bill.
Yeah, thanks, Haley. Great presentation. What comes to my mind is your group actually doing any solutioning around making the connection between micro mobility and transit? Because it's a big possibility in terms of the realm of the possible that could increase ridership, increase everything about transit. We got this thing going on now where some person can buy an e-bike for $4,000 and they might be 30 minutes away. And if they could just hop on a bus and we can give them high frequency, then suddenly our ridership blows up, which would be a good thing. So what my ask is, well, first my question is, are we working on any solutions around how we make that connection? Almost like, what does a good bus stop look like? Things like that, because I think that's a big need.
In general, I think, yes, there's work being done on trying to improve our bus stops. There's $1 million grant that the city received to make bus stop improvements. And among lots of different potential improvements, one of those things is like an ADA landing ramp. And in some cases, like if there's needing to extend the sidewalk to connect with an existing sidewalk, that is something being considered. Jessica, do you have any other thoughts on that and making connections to transit?
Okay.
Well, and I might need more clarification from you, Bill, on what you're thinking, but we do have the ability the buses carry bikes. We can carry 3 bikes on each bus, and part of this conversation is permitting people to have e-scooters and other micromobility devices, and it would permit them to bring those onto buses if they needed to. So for example, like if you want to ride your e-scooter to the bus stop and get on a bus with it, this would permit you to do so, whereas currently you're technically not allowed to. So to that extent, we feel like this is facilitating last mile connectivity. If that's kind of where you're going, but I may have misunderstood what you're thinking.
Well, I don't have a solution, but just to answer, I think what's needed is we need to take a mindset of, okay, say I've got one and I live in a neighborhood that I could utilize transit if I could just figure out a way to do it. My guess is picking up an e-bike and putting it on a bus may not be the best solution. We might need parking facilities. We might need e-chargers. We might need things that are compelling to force this behavior, as opposed to just letting the rider figure out how to do it. I mean, this is a potential big benefit that we could bring on, but we gotta design it. And I'd like to see some energy going towards designing ways in which we can use things like this to increase ridership on transit. That's where I'm coming from.
Okay.
Jared?
Hey there, Haley, really appreciate the presentation. I may have missed it just a little bit, but I heard a couple of things in there around recognizing the difficulty with enforcement and just not being familiar with these rules. I can tell you I'm breaking laws every day with my kids in these streets. And over there in Montford, many little street rats my kids run around with, they're breaking all the rules too. And it's pretty good. I enjoy seeing them on their skateboards and scooters and whatnot. And I really like, somebody said, like an elegant solution of maybe not including, having a policy with some blind spots, especially where it's kind of spongy around enforcement. It seemed like, so I guess maybe I missed it, but is the intent of the policies being considered right now really just trying to put bumpers on the alleyway to keep the ball, heading down the lane there? Or are we trying to get real specific? Because if enforcement's going to be difficult and we're not going to get funding for enforcement, I'm not trying to belittle this, but I go down the Greenway and people like road bikes. I'm like, why is a road bike on the Greenway? I don't know. I ride a road bike. I just go on the street. It's great. Those kinds of things, they're just going to be difficult to enforce. So I mean, for me, it seems a difficult conversation because it may be a situation where you almost weaponize a policy by putting rules out there and then having people in the community feeling entitled to, self-patrol, if that makes sense. I just don't know if the objective is a broad policy outlining what our objectives are as a city or our specific actually objectives.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the intent is, while removing barriers, also keeping all of the users of our public space safe and anticipating certain conflicts and doing our best to do what we can to promote safe riding and safe interactions between users of these devices and users of sidewalks. Is that?
Yeah. I grew up in an era where, I rode BMX and skateboards, and I literally did get tickets on a regular basis for riding a BMX bike on a sidewalk, riding a skateboard on a sidewalk. And then now I'm getting grounded. Now I'm mowing extra lawns. Now I'm, and I didn't personally enjoy that. So, I got a little bit of a streak where I probably enjoyed it a little bit.
So like some of you probably recognize, like the current prohibition on skateboarding on sidewalks in the CBD. I'm guessing 90% of Asheville doesn't know that that's the current law, and you can't. And then the flip side is that the current law says that you can't skateboard on a road outside the CBD. So what we're trying to do is basically get rid of a lot of those prohibitions and make it so that the things that are generally already happening are no longer prohibited. The one place where we're suggesting potentially considering continuing to prohibit things is on sidewalks in the CBD because of the nature of the sidewalks in the CBD. They're narrow, they're very heavily pedestrian used. But we have disagreement even within our own staff on whether or not that we should be prohibiting people from using a one wheel on a sidewalk in downtown or a skateboard or what have you. So overall, what we're trying to do is reduce barriers and allow for these devices to be used, because the more prohibitions we put on them, the less likely they are to be used. And we want to make legal what we feel should be legal. But the big rub has always been, what about the downtown and the very narrow sidewalks that we have that are also very busy? How do we treat that? And so our first blush at this was, well, let's maybe try to be a little conservative and not allow it at first. And if we think that it's going well, then we could consider allowing it in the future. But that was our first approach.
Thanks, Jessica. Leanna, and then Jake Smith.
I just think this conversation is super interesting. I really appreciate Jared's illumination of like punitive action. Like, we're using really punitive language around what we're really, I think, getting at is like how we have shared expectations on use. And I think maybe we're stuck a little bit, right, in our kind of societal symptom of, right, like we have rules that are very black and white, so that these are the ways that we adhere, and like we probably don't govern with guidelines, or like work on roadway rules and sidewalk rules with guidelines. But I do think that, you know, as we think about, you know, what equity and justice and fair use looks like, I don't know if there are ways to have shared expectations on use that aren't starkly defined as, you know, punishable and not, you know, or what that is and looks like. Also knowing what the capacity is of, you know, enforcers to be limited. So I wanted to put a fine point on that particularly, because I know as the attorneys are looking at it, they might say, yeah, it's just a black and white, yes and no kind of way. But if there's gray area that would make sense, I think I just really appreciate, you know, shared expectation communication is unique and different, perhaps.
And Jake.
Yeah, so I'm all for like increasing personal mobility devices, but I kind of similarly don't understand what's to stop a hotel from ordering a fleet of e-scooters and just handing them out to tourists while they go brewery hopping, and not necessarily understanding the legality of it. There's a huge difference between you know, me personally owning a e-bike or a skateboard and going out and doing something because I know the risk that I'm taking. I know how dangerous it is. I know the area that I'm traveling to. Whereas if you put somebody that doesn't understand that same risk, they get handed a helmet and they go put that helmet in their hotel room, and then they go out and just, you know, try and find their way around the city while drinking. Not that there's anything wrong with drinking. But it seems like it could be a larger hassle for definitions when it comes down to things.
Real quick, I just wanted to know, I think part of the reason of spelling out so plainly, at least in this presentation, to allow for the use of devices on public sidewalks is because existing language and code prohibits it. So like at the very minimum, we need to remove that language today.
Jessica, your hand's up.
Well, I was just interested in what Jake was bringing up. So are you saying that, because what you brought up is actually kind of is something we've talked about, where it's like, it's not a sharing company. It's not like a Lime or whatever company out there that drops them on the sidewalk. But we've had conversations about, you know, you can go rent a bike from a bike shop now. So should that bike shop or some other business be allowed, or hotel be allowed to rent them out or loan them out? And I think that's a really good thing for us to also talk about, because there are some downside, like you're saying, like the person doesn't own it, they maybe don't know how to use it. They're also probably not going to be just leaving it in the middle of the sidewalk, hopefully. So it might be, and we will have to talk with legal about that specific instance, because we've been focused on, like, we're trying to keep the sharing companies, prohibited. We want to allow people like you and me to own one and use one, but there's that middle ground about local businesses and hotels that might want to use them. And so are you thinking that we should not allow a private business or private business to rent them out and loan them out?
Yeah, so I personally think the bikes are considerably safer that you can go out and rent, mostly because 90% of the time you see these tourists that are on bike tours, they've got a guide with them. The guide is helping them around, showing them places to go, and ensuring that they're all wearing their helmets and trying to be as safe as possible. Whereas if you hand somebody a device they've never used before, it's essentially like just saying, yes, you've never driven a car, but go out and drive around with less safety. There are hotels right now that do have, I think there's at least one or two, maybe they're just B&Bs. But they've got shared bike services where you can just go downstairs, grab a bike and walk out. And I think if there's not enough clarification with this, there might just be some hotels that go out and invest, $10,000 in scooters and say, hey, it wasn't defined and we already kind of loan out bikes to people. So what's the difference?
Yeah. Mike Zukowski, floor is yours.
Yeah, and I think that is a good question. What's the difference between a hotel lending out a bike and electric bike? I know at the Element, for instance, off the Tunnel Road, does hand out bicycles to their guests, and they don't ask if you've ever ridden a bike or anything else. So I'm not sure that saying that you can do it with a bike but not a different type of mobility device is the right thing to do.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I also might comment too, as a future agenda item is to talk about Connect Bunkum's etiquette campaign around greenways. And, I just think about dogs on leashes and off leashes. This feels like a very similar problem, as something where we have to work together as a community. It's very difficult to enforce. It's very difficult to create the rules and have people follow them. So it's a great conversation. Before we move on to our next agenda item, are there any other comments or questions for Haley?
I'll just say, Joe Chesler, I see your comment in the chat about if these policies are consistent with the ART system rules, and I'll just make sure to take a look through those after this meeting and make sure that there's no conflicts. But in general, this has been a very productive and helpful conversation. I'm hearing perhaps a shift away from like that language of allowing use and maybe just removing cases and language that prohibits use. So yeah, other?
I can probably guarantee you that we'd love to continue to participate in this conversation to help guide what's happening. But also what I'm hearing too is the idea of creating micro mobility share program, like an e-scooter program, that's something that's way off in the future. This is sort of the first step. That is something that's not on the table, correct?
That's correct.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, fair enough. That sounds complicated, but I like the opportunity to think about these things.
Yeah,
yeah,
we're just trying.
Yeah, go
we're
ahead.
just trying to address. We're just trying to kind of make legal what people are already doing. You know, that are legitimate transportation choices, and then I just wanted to mention on Friday we'll be doing the same presentation to the downtown commission, and then our plan is to also go to the riverfront commission in February, I think. Is that right, Haley?
Yeah.
And we'll also, I likely be going to the Planning and Economic Development Council Committee either January or February. So trying to hit as many groups as we can and get as much feedback as we can before we dive into actual ordinance revision.
And we'll
which
give
will then go to council.
We'll give Councilwoman Ullman the last word on this.
I just wanted to highlight how, I mean, outside of this policy conversation specifically, like this is just a good example. I think we started earlier talking about what are the roles of boards and commissions, what are the roles of council, what are the roles of staff, and the difference between what and how. And just this is a good example of like, this is real specific policy. Y'all are getting into the level of depth and like, wait a minute, if we say this, what are the implications? So I just feel like it's really thoughtful, and it's really gray, that zone where we show up on these commissions and we want to help. And so just wanted to, as we're figuring our way through the gray of what is our role, this is a really good example of it. So just wanted to highlight that.
Yay, that's thank you, Maggie. That's also a great segue into our next agenda item, which is the retreat, which is coming up in January. I hope Jake and Jared will be able to join us for it. We worked hard on finding a date, which I realized y'all didn't have an opportunity to chime in on. But I want to say a few words about the retreat and then open the table for any thoughts or suggestions. But real quickly, we made an adjustment to the times. We're doing 2 4-hour sessions, and I understand that 8 a.m. is inhumane, so we've moved it to 9 to 1. And but we will do, and I hope folks will show up at 8:30 to have a little bit of coffee and hang out, and then we'll hit the ground running at 9 to 1. We'll have lunch, so be looking for some information, a call out for sandwiches or whatever we do there. And I love the idea, whoever's suggestion it was earlier, to break this into 2 sessions. I really love that idea, actually, because I think it gives us an opportunity to make some adjustments in between those times to make all of our 8 hours together really, really useful. So January 19th and then February 3rd. The 19th, by the way, is a Friday, and February 3rd is a Saturday. And that'll be a 10 to 2 meeting. And I think we'll work through, sort of do a working lunch, but we'll see how that fleshes out. And it'll be down at the municipal building downtown. Couple things that I wanted to say. Jessica, Kenny, and Lucy have spent a little bit of time taking your feedback, and building an agenda. And that agenda is still, a work in progress. We'll have an outside facilitator to work with us, which is something that I think folks were excited about. I think it's a great idea, frankly. If there is a role that you're interested in playing in the retreat around food, around anything, note-taking, let me know where you're excited to plug in, because I think the more roles that we have will be great. Of course, just being a participant is the requirement. And so I'm grateful for that. Make sure you'll see in the 2021 retreat notes they're really great. Like the last retreat seemed really useful and effective. So make sure you take a look at that. We will have some various reading assignments. We will ask you members to really come prepared and dive into some of the documents, the plans, so you come in with a very strong understanding and context. All of you all do. I know you all do that work, so I don't think I even need to say it. I have been playing around a little bit with thinking about and communicating what the purpose and goal of the retreat would be. And I wanted to share with you some things that I am thinking of. Some of the agenda items are going to be, thoughtful business things that we just need to work out. But here are a few sort of themes that I wanted to work with and get your input on. But one, I feel like it's really important to build community. And that will be, I hope we have an opportunity to do that, to get to know each other a little bit more. And I feel like there's always a barrier in this digital format. I think we use it well, but I'm looking forward to seeing everyone in person. Many of you all I have met in person, and I have found that extremely helpful in knowing you better and what your motivations are. What I thought would be a good theme is to for us not to just think about which ideas and policies that we want to move forward, although I think that's an important thing that we'll need to discuss. I think a lot of that work was done in the previous retreats that we can build off of. Obviously, things have changed at a fast pace since 2021 because of COVID and our rapidly changing city. So we will obviously revisit what we do as a commission, but I also want to really focus on how we do it. And that's the segue from Maggie. So I really want that to be a important theme of the retreat, is not just the things that we're advocating for, the things that we're prioritizing for, but how we do it, to really think about how we can as a group collectively move really good ideas forward, whether that's to the community or to city council or to the staff of the transportation department. And I'd love for us to really put our heads together and understand that and come with some sort of collective understanding of not just what we do, what we're advocating for, but how we do it, what our process is. And I know I've heard from many folks that the reason why people burn out on commissions is that it feels like you're spinning your wheels. And it's our city, every city basically, is complicated. And so I think there's a lot of great work that we can do. So those are sort of some of the ideas in my sandbox that I've been thinking about and that I think align with sort of a very rough draft agenda that we've put together. But I'd love to get your thoughts and input to help shape that a little bit tighter. My hope is that we can all, when we walk into this retreat, is that we have a common purpose. Any thoughts, folks?
Go ahead, Jared.
Yeah, Jared, then over to you, Leanna.
Couple basic thoughts. I always work better in the morning, fueled up on a donut. So if no one's volunteered to bring a rack of donuts, you can count me in on that. Coffee's great. I need that too. But if I'm really going to get some stuff done, an apple fritter, some coconut icing, something like that's really going to get the juices pumping. So we can start there. And then also, I would like to say, I can see how it's difficult for folks to feel like good work's getting done. I come from a town that's as big as Asheville, and literally I never hear anything from the city council at all whatsoever. We really didn't have bike lanes or greenways or anything like that. They seem to maybe have gotten one or two since I left 20 years ago. So I think everyone here can just the short time I've been here, folks are super engaged in providing deep and meaningful
thoughtful conversation and helping the city.
Thanks, Jared. Leanna, your hand is up still? Do you want to take it?
Yeah, all I was gonna say is your outline sounds really great. Thank you for putting thoughts together on that approach. And I think I'll just denote for folks that in addition to the notes from the last retreat and other information that might be shared, the survey that we did of this group also included some ideas that folks had within this group for focus and priority topics that we might want to think about. So it might also be a good reference to review.
Yeah, thank you. And definitely have looked at those for sure. And we will also definitely have an opportunity for us just to break out in groups and brainstorm and share ideas while being careful not to reinvent the wheel. We don't need to, restart the great work that past folks have done. Jake, did you have your hand up? No, Randy. Oh, Randy, go for it.
One thing that's important to have in mind as a resource for this too is the council's priorities, because we can have all kinds of different ideas and stuff like that that are very meaningful and very important to do for our city. But if the council doesn't have it as a priority and we can't tie into what our objectives are to the council priority, the council won't take any action on anything that we're doing. So it's important to kind of make sure that we frame what we work, how it works into the council priorities. Now, Maggie, you can tell us, but the council, the retreat won't have happened. When does that happen? And when do they set their priorities for the year?
Ours is late February, like the 20s, something 23rd, 25th, something like that.
So it might be hard to do that then necessarily, but I just know in the past we've run into issues where we have great ideas and the council would say, that's a great idea, but it's not a priority for us right now. So thanks, put that on the back shelf and we'll see. So we've done a good idea of like safety is a council priority for this year. So we do a good idea of saying, well, all this goes into safety, or we frame it in that way. And so that it helps us then be more relevant to what council is looking for.
I think it can work both of those ways. I think you're right. I think I'm finding it difficult right now because transportation isn't in like the first concentric circle with my colleagues. And it's totally in my first priority circle. And so that's hard. Like, how do we rebuild political will? Not that people are saying, I don't like this, but that, priorities evolve and change over time. So I think that that's a really important strategic conversation for us to grapple with, is like building back broader support. We can just look at some of the votes we've had in the last several months on transportation things. We spent 10 years advocating and getting the policies and getting the plans on the books. And now we're starting to implement them and the votes are shaky. And so, so I think, Brenda, your point is, the directions matter, but I also think that having this retreat before council's retreat can also be really good, because then I can have that experience to go into council and say, hey, we just spent 8 hours in multimodal and here are the things that we're really interested in seeing. So it can also be a fuel to share with and advocate to councilwomen as we go into our retreat. And that might be something to really think about, is how can we be connecting our priorities? And I always just find, anyway, I'll stop there.
Thanks, Maggie. Bill.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I'm hearing you right, Jack. So you were saying we want to build community, great. We want to see how we can work together better and how to move ideas forward, great, love it. Do we need to be thinking about anything we should bring to the retreat?
I think, that's a great question. And I think we will provide, once we provide the agenda, I think that will add some clarity. So yeah, I think that's a great question. We'll try and be specific about that. But like I said, Bill, I think we're gonna have an opportunity to report back on the work that we're doing, on the things that we're passionate about, and making sure that there's a clear opportunity for people to share things. But at this point, we're still working on that agenda, so hold tight. And obviously the holidays are coming up, but with plenty of notice, folks will have a chance to look at the agenda so they know how to prepare for the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
And Jared.
Sorry for dipping back in. Was wondering if it might be good for folks to maybe think about other boards and commissions that they're passionate about and how they might interlink with transit, and speak into kind of Maggie's, political will building and some of that. I think some of the instability in the voting right now is maybe there could it sometimes feel like there's a lot of pressure on council to make independent decisions. And so maybe there's an opportunity for all of us to think about the other folks that we're connected to in the community, interlinking how transportation, public transportation ridership builds on equity, how safety on roadways builds on even commercial activity. It builds on the culture of the city. It sounds funny to say, but I think all those things are interlinked, and sometimes we just have to brainstorm on how to craft a narrative that makes a meaningful connection with each of the council people. And, then if we do that across boards, then, maybe say there's a right-of-way closure, say there's a new bus stop that's needed or an improvement for bus stops, we can go to whoever it may be, right? Planning and zoning, for instance. I'll be glad to go to them and say, look, it would be great if we could write a letter in support to city council that we believe MMTC is doing the right thing here. It matches the philosophy of planning and zoning. And we also think it matches the philosophy and the goals and objectives of city council. And so those are exciting things we could talk about that day if it seems appropriate.
Yeah, and Jared, to tag on to that, I just, in my observations, not just city-related things, but I think broad coalitions get good work done. And I agree. I think if we're working in a silo, that is potentially problematic. So I think the more opportunities we have to build strong coalitions, aiming for strong policies that we believe in, I like that idea. So I'm open to, as that agenda develops, I'm open to participation in places where it makes sense to bring other folks into the conversation, or at least start thinking about it. Other folks, any other thoughts on the retreat? Don't hesitate to email me as well. Well, awesome. Jessica, thanks for your help and enthusiasm in helping us get this on the table. Randy, any other thoughts of folks who were at the last agenda? I know you were there, Randy. I can't remember which other folks were in attendance, but any lessons learned or anything that we need to take or not do from that last time that you can think of?
Yeah, I think that, so I think I've been to 2 different retreats we've had for multimodal, and I mean, there's so many challenges because really 8 hours is nothing, you know? So we have to be pretty efficient with our time. And Maggie actually helped run the last one too. So she's got some really good thoughts on that too. And last time, I think what we were good at is we identified areas that we really are concerned about and have passion about, and things that we think we can get done. So that's something that, we can, because we can, like for the bike share, for example, the bike share is we've been working on that for 7 to 8 years now. And so if we said we want a bike share in 2024, that's probably unrealistic. But if we said we want to do these 3 things that will help us to establish bike share in the future, but we can do these things in 2024, that's important so that we can have focus for what we're currently able to do.
Yeah.
As well as having that bigger vision. We obviously have to have the bigger vision too. But I think that's one thing we did well last time is we said, and so one of the things we from that was connectivity, for route connectivity. And so I push that in everything we do. I say, this is one of our stated priority goals for the year. And so this helps with connectivity, and so we have stated a mission to do this. So I think that's what can really come out of this too. If we can set those concrete things that we can tie all of our work that we do in 2024 to those objectives we stated, that just gives us more validity and more credibility in the city. So
yeah, excellent. Thanks, Randy. All right, folks. What I want to do in the time that we have left is to hear back, to get some general committee updates. This is something I don't think we've ever quite gotten to yet, but I want to allocate about 3 minutes to each committee to kind of give us a brief update of the things that you're working on. That's not a whole lot of time, but I'd like to start, and feel free, anyone on these committees chime in. But first off, the transit committee, would you guys give us an update of what y'all are working on?
Yeah.
Or Joe, you want to go?
Yeah, just quick, Bill. One thing that I referenced in the chat box there is the HART system rules have been approved and advanced. I sent the link there in the chat. You're welcome to review them, and I just wanted to make sure that as the other policies on micromobility evolve, that we're consistent with the HART rules, and it appears to be. I just wanted to throw that out there. That was a big accomplishment of the committee over the last few months. Anything else, Bill?
Well, I'll just say.
You broke up, Bill.
I think he fell asleep.
Yeah. Well, we'll come back to Bill when he reconnects. Bill, are you still there? You broke up.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Now we can. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I got bad internet. So it hadn't been meeting much. One of the things that's transpired that we want to fill you guys in on as we go forward is that, Jack, thanks for your introduction to me and Elise getting together and her passion about transit. She's not on the committee, but is interested in transit. Just so everybody knows, Joe and Elise and I have created a little transit working group, if you will, and we talked about that in the last meeting, and transit likes it, and they want it to sort of be sourced out of Jack and MMPC as opposed to within transit. So anyway, we are, the three of us, trying to get kind of an assessment of where we are and what things we should work on. So the three of us are kind of working hard at that. I was hoping Elise could give you a little update on some of the stuff she's doing. She's really into some potential revenue generation ideas, which would be pretty cool. But it's too early to do that. But anyway, we're working on that, and our hope is to come back to you guys at a proper point. Jack, you can advise us on that, on some of the stuff we're doing. So the other big thing that came out of the meeting was Jessica was very helpful in guiding us through what does this exactly mean to have a working group. And so we know how that works now. So in terms of working together well in the future, now we know how. So Jack, so that might be part of our discussion.
Yeah, no, that's great. I do think it would be. I hope we do define what a working group is. Thank you all, Bill, Joe, and Elise, who is ill, for your all's great work and leadership and getting some work done behind the scenes, and looking forward to connecting that. No longer Greenway Committee, now the Active Transportation Committee. Leanna and Mike, what do y'all have to share of some things that y'all are working on?
I'm going to defer to Mike because I had to miss the meeting on December 7th due to work travel.
Actually, in our last meeting, it was mostly just updates from the city. Unless if Lucy has something else to add. Okay.
I think Lucy stepped off.
That was my review.
Yeah.
I did review the agenda, and it did look like it was largely updates.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And Jared, how about a little update on planning and zoning, also known as P&Z?
Yeah, so over at P&Z, we're basically the opposite of this board and commission. Like, we literally are very transactional. Our agenda is just like, you're going to review this, you're going to review that, you're going to look at the technical documents. You stay, we can have quasi judicial hearings there. So it can be very formal in that way. But what we're actually working to do is ensure that as a team, we come very prepared and understand our positions, and, and also now roll into it a little bit more policy focus and build that time into our agenda, which is part of why you hear me talking so passionately with you folks. Is there are other folks on our team who are talking with other boards and committees and trying to do a better job of bringing folks together. So that's kind of our big focus at the time. And in particular, I think we do really understand maybe that this board doesn't, you guys may not feel like you have much input right now or much sway, but we think there's great potential there because you take into account last night's council meeting, and most of the conversation for every development is really around traffic. And people don't even understand, what's a state road versus an Asheville City maintained road. And so I think just for you folks to be aware that we're engaged in that way, and that you can reach out to me or anyone else from the board you may know. That's really the biggest thing I think we got going on right now.
Yeah, cool. Jared, thank you for that. That's awesome. And hey, MMTC was mentioned at the council meeting, so that's a measurement of how important we are. Yeah, I think the retreat is building our influence. So I love that. Thank you, Jared. Hey, Jake, would you give us a little update on the Neighborhood Advisory Committee?
Sure. So our last meeting was November 27th. We went over some of our 2024 goals, heard updates from the Homeless Strategy Division and the Missing Middle Housing study. The next meeting is currently scheduled for January 22nd. We're going to be switching to a semi-monthly meeting, so no meeting February, meeting in March, etc., on and on. That's going to allow the committee to create more breakout groups and do more independent research and bring that information back to the committee itself. We're also going to begin planning for the Festival of Neighborhoods again in January. Not that the event is in January, but that we're beginning planning, thankfully. We didn't have this much of a lead last year when we started planning, so we're definitely looking forward to making a larger and more accessible festival for everyone, and definitely would love to see a MMTC table out there.
Yeah, Jake, we've had some conversations about listening to neighborhoods and trying to get a sense of, feelings about bike lanes and transportation and greenways. Any obvious strategies you have for us for connecting?
Attend neighborhood meetings. That, and we, just like this meeting, we definitely have a public input time, and anybody's allowed to show up to our on-site meetings at City Hall. So even if you don't want to do that, there's a phone number you can call and leave a voicemail on, and that will get read during our meetings.
Great. Thanks, Jake, and welcome. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you.
And then finally, the I-26 Aesthetics Committee.
Yes, we have finished our final report. It is going to be published. Right now, we're trying to get some hard copies of it also. But hopefully before our meeting, we should be able to, before our retreat, we should be able to send out copies to everybody, the electronic copies. Of course, that's to go before City Council first, just to give to them first as a courtesy, and then it should be going out to anybody who wants it. It's pretty extensive. It kind of gives you our vision of the I-26 corridor, how we got to where we ended up, and some of the aesthetic treatments that we hope that in the future will be incorporated in other parts of the city. And so we have a unified look, and we made a large effort to make sure that what we did is cohesive to the feel and the look of the city as it exists.
Yeah, excellent, Mike. Thanks for your work on that. Maggie, go ahead, and then I want to give Leanna a moment to update on the Nasty Branch tour, or anyone to update on that. Go ahead, Maggie.
Yeah, and just really quick on the I-26 Aesthetics Committee, there was also a recommendation that's come through around recommending that the speed limit onto Patton Avenue be reduced, the design speed limit from 35 to 25, and we are going to take that up at the Planning and Economic Development Committee meeting in January to hopefully have something around that happen, then also go on a council agenda before the final deadline for DOT to receive design proposals. So we're working on that.
Yeah, okay. That's awesome. Let us know how we can voice our support for a lower speed limit to make it safer. That's going to be really important. Leanna, what's yeah, some folks did a tour of Nasty Branch Greenway. Leanna, what's your update for us?
Just, we talked about it, I think, at the last meeting of this group, that there was a note from Jessica or Lucy, one that the tour was going to happen, one happened on Friday, and there's another coming up tomorrow. So the intent, I think, is to engage with the community. The panels, the interpretive panels are posted at the Grant Center if folks are interested in seeing them. I don't know that they've been installed yet. Oh, great. And Maggie's got a real live update. She went last week. I'm going to try to go tomorrow, but I don't have more details. I saw your question, Jared. I know the time, but I don't know any of the other logistics. Anna Sexton with the city is a good point of contact for that.
Yeah, awesome, y'all. Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, Maggie, thanks for mentioning that speed on Patton. I wanted to see, would it help if MMTC does anything official in terms of supporting that? I know we did something on Complete and it passed. This speed change is, I can't imagine anybody on this group not wanting us to do it because it has huge mitigation impacts on the streetscape. So Maggie, question to you, if we came up with a letter or something that's the endorsement of the MMTC, would that help?
I think that's a fantastic question. And this just keeps circling around this conversation of what does having influence look like, and what are the roles of these committee, and what is the back and forth? I think that it definitely doesn't hurt. I think that I am extremely committed to making this happen. Now is the time, and it's a very, very high stakes conversation, because if we go and design a 35, this is the next 100 years of our infrastructure with DOT. Yeah. And I know the mayor is also very, very committed to making this happen. Senator Mayfield is very committed to making this happen. So there's strong political will. The message has been heard. So I think a conversation from a letter could be nice. It wouldn't hurt. I think what always makes the biggest change is that people trust who they trust, and they listen to who they trust. And so fundamentally, so I think a letter is helpful, but doing something in committee can stay in committee unless it grows legs through each of your relationships. This is a particular topic where I don't think it hurts to be talking to other councilwomen or sharing or advocating, but I also see there's a lot of effort behind this right now. So that was, you asked for maybe my 2 cents, and I just gave you a quarter.
That's great. That's great. And I really feel we'll be building on those ideas. That was a good answer to your question. Bill, let's maybe work on something and think about that. Jared, we'll give you the floor for the last minute and then we'll wrap things up so folks can get to dinner.
I'll be super quick. I just wanted to follow up with Bill that I think PZC, we'd like to review that as well. And if a letter seems appropriate, because currently that corridor is really hard to think about rezoning when people are traveling so fast. Like it can't feel like a housing corridor if people are trying to do Mach 1 up Merriman, you know? So I think about the public good of that street and the benefit that's there. I mean, I can't say that we will write that letter, but I can say I'll have many passionate conversations if that could be useful. And then I know a couple of people in North Asheville that aren't as influential, but who would, you know, I can have that little conversation on the streets too. So if there's another way, let us know.
Yeah, awesome, y'all.
Hey, Jack, could I just have one more?
Yeah, yes, Phil, please.
I've got a good source who can come up with some talking points. If you want me to, I can just put them down and get them to you. And if they take the form of a letter, great. Otherwise, what I'm hearing from Maggie is take those talking points and talk about them to people of influence, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, Bill, kick that off. That sounds great.
And then when it's on the Planning and Economic Development Committee agenda, have someone come and give comment. And when it's on City Council, have come and give comment there too. I think that would be nice.
Yeah, we need to start showing up. Great. Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Question. Is there a line? I know I showed up and spoke last night at council and I was kind of like, I don't even know if I'm still supposed to show up here and speak. Is that, Maggie, am I stepping over any lines, showing up there and speaking randomly to support? Is anyone on the board doing that?
I don't think that's crossing a line. I think for you, because you're quasi-regulatory, we should have a separate conversation, which I don't think you're doing anything wrong, but you'll have different considerations than MMTC. But I think it is totally effective and great when appointed leadership like everyone here chimes in when we're making decisions during committee and council meetings. That's really helpful.
Great way to end it. Y'all, we are not going to have a January regular meeting. We are going to focus on our retreat for January, and our next regular meeting will be in February. So that is something that we'll make note of. We will not be meeting January 19th. Thank you, everyone, for your really incredible comments and work. I'm really enjoying working with you all. Unless there are any objections, I will adjourn the meeting. Are there any objections? The meeting is adjourned. See you all at the retreat in 2024.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Appreciate you.